Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching this queer masterclass on museum practice. I'm really thrilled to be talking to you about my work and what I have done in the time that I've been working at Whitworth Art Gallery in Manchester, and my interests and my trajectory of how I got to where I am, and how I've done what I've done. Um, so I went to university quite late. I worked in bars and clubs, and restaurants for many years since I finished my A levels, and went back to university when I was 25, because I had always intended to go to university after I'd finished my A levels, and it never happened. I was doing really well in the career that I was doing, and got sidetracked, and lost focus a little bit as to what my goal was at the time when finishing my A levels. And I was intending to go back to university. So I lost a little bit of focus, and that's fine to do, because actually the work experience that I'd got had been in and around Manchester's gay village predominantly. And so all of that lived experience and all of that knowledge about working with the LGBTQ plus community, I brought to university. And what I noticed when I started to do an art history undergraduate degree was that through the modules that I was studying, there was no LGBTQ plus representation. There was no queer bodies, or, no queer life. I didn't recognize myself. I didn't recognize my partner. I didn't recognize my friends, my chosen family, any of those kind of people, all of those kind of people, all of those people that are very special to me. I didn't recognize within the canon that is art history. Um, and so throughout that undergraduate degree, I focused more and more on queer museum practice, and pushed my lecturers along with me, to also think about their own queer practice and their own, uh, not queer practice, sorry, not their own queer practice. They didn't have a queer practice, but to think about what queer practice means within that cultural institution, within that university institution. So I went to Liverpool John Moores University, and I really brought my lecturers with me about on this journey, learning about queer museum practice and queer art history. And so what's great now is that they actually have embedded like some modules on queer history within the overall art history degree there, which is really, really great. So I'm really pleased that they have caught up with um, contemporary society and contemporary narratives of art history and museum practice as well. When I'd finished my undergraduate degree, my dissertation it was in 2017, before the 50th anniversary of the partial decriminalisation of the Homosexuality Act. And I think in Scotland it was a lot later, but in England it was 50 years in 2017. And lots of cultural institutions were doing big exhibitions to celebrate this. So, for example, Tate Britain had Queer Tate exhibition, which was the first time that they'd done a predominantly queer show at Tate Britain within their within that institution, and that was a really pivotal moment for them. And then National Museums Liverpool, at the Walker Art Gallery in Liverpool, had a queer exhibition called Coming Out, which charted um, 1967, which was when homosexuality was decriminalized, up until that present day, which was 2017. So it was 50 years, and charted queer art history's progress through those decades in that 50 years. So it was great to be part of and be in there thinking about queer museum practice on those celebrations. But actually, it did make me think also, well, are these institutions homophobic because they didn't have queer shows before, queer exhibitions before? And so I did that for my dissertation, and I did really well on it, because of all of that lived experience and passion, knowledge about queer community came into it as well. So all of that work experience I'd done prior, and all of my lived experience all fed into this dissertation. And I was older, and I had a little bit more experience, and so like I was like, okay, let's get this done. And then I went to the University of Leeds to do an art gallery and museum studies master's degree. Um, and this is where I really started to specialize in queer museum practice. So in my dissertation for my undergraduate, I'd asked, are cultural institutions homophobic because of their exhibition rhetoric? Um, and obviously after the dissertation was published, all of these things happened in these museums, like all of these queer shows. So obviously I couldn't say that there were because all of these exhibitions had happened. And so I started to specialize in more nuanced exhibition areas. So for my master's degree, I specialized in Jewish museum practice. And for my dissertation, I asked whether or not Holocaust exhibitions, um, where was the representation of LGBTQ plus people within Holocaust exhibitions? And it was a really interesting area. It was really nuanced. And what it taught me about was Jewish culture, the Holocaust, which are two very different things. Although obviously the Holocaust affected 6 million Jews, but the Holocaust is a part of Jewish history, but isn't Jewish culture. That was imposed upon these people. Um, and then looking at LGBTQ plus history within the Weimar Republic, which was in those 20s, in these, the early 20s, the noughties and the 20s, 1900s and 1910s, 20s, this Weimar Republic, which seemed like a really great period of time to be in. I mean, if we think about Cabaret, the musical with Liza Minnelli, if anybody knows that, which I think is on in the West End at the minute with Eddie Redmayne. That's a side note. Seemed a really exciting place. But then learning about how queer culture at that time was slowly being erased by this far right fascist Nazi group, and the troubles that happened with them, and then looking at LGBTQ plus communities within that period of history and what happened to them. So it was quite dark, and it wasn't the most cheerful of subjects. But once again, I could bring my lived experience of seeing people through history and really feeling um, empathy for them, what they were going through, and all those kind of things, really. And that really, all of that energy and all of that passion and compassion fed into my dissertation for my master's degree. And I did really well in that. Um, and now I'm doing a PhD at the University of Leeds, looking at LGBTQ plus representation within museums, which is hard work, quite exciting, but hard work. Um, and so what's good is that um, I'm a boy from a cis man from a council estate who didn't think he was going to go to university, ended up going to university, and now I'm doing a PhD as well. And then as part of my role in my job, I am teaching on the Art Gallery and Museums Masters at the University of Manchester. So these things happen, these very strange things can happen. Um, but that's because I have this direction and this passion and focus on a specific piece of museum practice, which isn't widely studied or isn't widely researched, or practitioners are not really focusing their writing or attention on it. I mean, people are obviously, but say for example in Manchester where I am, not that many people are doing that, but I am. So this is why I'm ending up teaching and I'm doing some dissertation supervisions as well for master's students. So that's really exciting too. Um, but what happened work-wise was that I left working in bars when I started my undergraduate degree, and I started volunteering in an art gallery. So I started volunteering here at the Whitworth 8 years ago now. Um, and I still worked a little part-time job in a bar, but not, it wasn't a career, it wasn't full-time. It was just a little part-time job. And so I started volunteering here whilst doing my undergraduate degree. And as I was volunteering, then a job came up on the front of house team. And so I jumped at the opportunity to be able to work on the front of house team. So that was part-time whilst I was doing my undergraduate and my master's degree. I was still working in the front of house. And then a job came up whilst I was at the end of my master's degree within the Whitworth, working on the young people's program, where we looked at like queerness within society and how young people think about that or relate to that, and what queerness actually is as a thing. It's not sexuality or gender. It's it's a political political frame of mind, those kind of things. Um, and then from working at the front, working on the Young People's Program, I became a project producer working on an exhibition called Undefining Queer, which was, I had this idea for my PhD about museum practice and how I wanted to embed queer practice within the museum. And so I developed an exhibition called Undefining Queer, and this is a catalogue of the exhibition um, with lots of really, really great artists and things like that in it. And it's a conversation piece, and there's lots of really, really, really great images throughout it, which I never thought I'd ever make a book. But I have. But actually, the Undefining Queer exhibition also really enabled me to work with some really great artists as well. So this is an artist called um, Ajamu X, who's a photographer, black queer photographer down in London, in Brixton. And he is the most generous person, such a great guy, very, very, very talented. And so what the exhibition enabled me to do was really build up these networks with artists that are working at the minute as well. Um, and local artists around too. So such as the likes of Sarah Joy Ford or Chester Tennyson and all those kind of artists that were working in the city, queer artists in the city, I really started to engage with and embed within thinking about what it means to develop a queer exhibition like Undefining Queer within the gallery itself and within Manchester. Because when the exhibition opened, Undefining Queer, over 1,000 people came to the private view, which is like amazing, which is one of the biggest private views that we've had here at the Whitworth. And in part, that was because we were working with the community. We were working with the LGBTQ plus community to put the exhibition together. We were working with queer artists in the city as well. And so all of these people were talking to their friends about this really great exhibition that was happening, and word got out that this exhibition was about to open. And so I remember the building and operations manager saying to me, "You're not going to have more than 180 people come, are you?" And I was like, "No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so." And over 1,000 people came. So it was like mega, really, really busy. But I can show you a couple of images of the exhibition so that you can see what it looked like, which unfortunately it's finished now, but it ran from um, January 2000 and 2000 and sorry, I can't get that image up at the moment. I do apologize. It ran from 2017, sorry, ran from January 2023 until December 2023. And I wrote an essay in the book about the exhibition and how it developed and how we got the group together and things like that. So I thought I'd give you a read of it just to get an idea about it what it is and how it came about, if that's all right. So just give me a second and I'll get that up. So what the Whitworth was thinking about was what it means when this exhibition was developed, what it means to be an artistic and cultural institution, because the Whitworth in Manchester is part of the University of Manchester. It is the university's art gallery. And so what happened when we were developing the exhibition was that recent global events such as COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movement had drawn urgent attention to issues of social inequality. Um, and so we were really aware of these social inequalities at the time, and particularly with the queer community. But one of the fundamentals was care, and care is fundamental to the Whitworth, because we're a gallery in a park, which is for everyone. And so it's a place where we can come together and find refuge, a place to care for people and our culture, our queer culture, but also other cultures. But, you know, I was really looking at the queer culture within the gallery. And art helps us to make those connections with the complexities of the world and to think differently. Because the Whitworth is a space and a workshop where we can actively learn from each other, putting these creative processes at the center of everyday life. We promote the practical processes of creativity on all scales, from the making of objects to the making of a better world. We acknowledge that the foundations on which this gallery was built, not just the bricks and mortar, but the institutional foundations on which the gallery was built. We want to push for continuous structural change. My ambition is to transform the ways that art is experienced and used. And it should address what matters in people's lives, respond to current urgencies, and contribute solutions. Because we believe, and I believe, that art is a tool for active social change. And so these were the principles at the Centre of Undefining Queer, this exhibition that we developed. It was a project and an exhibition which was first developed by the curatorial team and myself in the summer of 2021. We were quite lucky as we were just coming out of lockdown and we were able to go into the stores and things. This is a first of a kind queer constituent exhibition for the gallery, which has delved into the Whitworth's collection to explore how the LGBT community can use a queer lens to disrupt perceived binary notions of gender, sex, and sexuality in order to challenge inequalities. So what we were really conscious about was that the institution, the Whitworth, shouldn't be the voice of the LGBTQ plus community, because the gallery is heteronormative, because society is heteronormative, and by default, so is the gallery. So we're really conscious about what the gallery says and who says it. So what we did for this exhibition was to bring a group of 15 to 20 LGBTQ plus people from Greater Manchester together within the gallery to help us develop this exhibition. And so we allowed these people to go into the stores, have a look at the artworks, choose these artworks that they wanted to. And then when we had all these artworks together, we started to see thematic approaches happen. We started to see themes emerge. And what we asked the constituents or participants to do was to choose an artwork and to write their interpretation of that artwork in their own words, not through any kind of, if they had any kind of art historical knowledge, great. If they didn't, absolutely not a problem whatsoever. If the work was by a queer artist, fine. If the work wasn't by a queer artist, but they saw something queer within the artwork, great. That was exactly what we're after. That was exactly what we wanted. Not all of the artworks in the exhibition, which were nearly 80, were by queer artists. A lot were. A lot of the foundational works that were on display were by queer artists, but not all of them were, and that didn't matter. We encouraged people to choose artworks which could respond to anything. They could choose artworks that were about Renaissance art in Britain, for example. So we can see here now in this image, all these on the left-hand side of the image on the white wall, all of these works are from the Renaissance, so from about the 16th century, Italy, and all depict some kind of queerness or some kind of myth the constituents particularly were drawn to. On the pink wall, for example, you can see the AIDS wallpaper down the side, which was massively important for the queer community, for the LGBT community, and our history to acknowledge that. And I'm still sat here now with an AIDS ribbon on my lanyard. And we can see that the brown wallpaper at the side of the AIDS wallpaper is by somebody who celebrates the beauty of Black and brown women. And what was really good about Nikki de Sanfal was that there's an iPad at the side of the brown wallpaper in this image, and she wrote this book for her son to protect him from catching HIV in the early 80s because a lot of her friends were dying from HIV/AIDS. And she was a really great ally, was Nikki de Sanfal. She's really great. She was an ally for Black and brown people. She was an ally for the queer community. And so she wrote this open book, which was published and nobody could buy it, about how to prevent yourself from catching HIV at that time. She was absolutely amazing. And so she was absolutely included within the queer exhibition. And so Nikki de Sanfal was straight. She had, had children, but she was an ally. And so we really felt connected to her, particularly during this theme of, on this pink wall on the right is about activism. So, I mean, you can see that one of the photographs says Nancy on it. The other one on the arm says freak. And so we were really conscious about using those words and reclaiming those words for ourselves as a community. And queer also was part of that. We decided categorically that queer needed to be in the title, and so we called it Undefining Queer, because we wanted to, how do we define queer when it cannot be defined? So that's where the title came from. We were really playing with the politics and the tensions between representation within the gallery and on the walls, the LGBTQ plus community, and what the academy, educational institutions say queer can be. Queer shouldn't be a describing word, apparently, according to them. It needs to be open and fluid and movable and in flux constantly. But yet a whole new generation of young people are calling themselves queer. And so there's this tension between how do we represent queer in the gallery on the wall against this tension within cultural, within educational establishments when we can't do that. That's not what queer is about. So this tension, which we really played with throughout the whole exhibition. Yes, so this came down in January of last year, sorry, in December of last year, which was very sad. But we are still working with our queer constituents here at the Whitworth. We're still working on a glossary of language, which we're building up to be able to build institutional confidence in what it is that we're doing when it comes to queer practice. We've published a book. So we had Cheddar Gorgeous's pink triangle outfit from Drag Race in the exhibition. And it's a real in conversation with people about it. You can get this on the Whitworth website if you wish to. And we've developed lots of other queer things as well. And so what's happened is that queer cultural practice has been embedded within the Whitworth now. And so if you came down to see the Whitworth currently, you can see that upstairs we have lots of protest banners, queer protest banners around trans lives, young trans lives, protecting trans lives, queer culture, all of those kind of things are on display in these placard forms of protest. So we've really embedded queer practice within the museum. And what I would say is, if you're wanting to be a queer practitioner, go for it. Don't let anybody tell you any different. It is joyous to see your community on the walls in all its glory. And queer love and queer friendship and queer community is a very, very special thing to be able to embed within a heteronormative cultural institution. So if you do want to be a queer practitioner, please do go for it and look at get that foundational knowledge in from art history degrees, at university, undergraduate degrees, look at art gallery museum studies or cultural practices within, for masters. And then yeah, constantly get that work experience as well, volunteering to start with, and then building up your experience that way. I hope this helps, and perhaps maybe I might see you one day in a gallery around the country. Okay, take care. Bye bye.